Greetings, friends. Greetings from Sabil. Greetings from Jerusalem. Greetings from Kumi now. Thank you all for being with us in another Kumi week as we discuss issues that are very important for Palestinians. Today, many of you who have received the newsletter know that we've dedicated this week to speak about or to address in our newsletter about nuclear Israel. But definitely that's not our topic today. I wish we can live in a world free of nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, most countries are considering to get nuclear weapons rather than to get rid of them. But that's not going to be our topic today. During the month of June, I believe, we got a request from Milan. Do I pronounce your name right, Milan?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. It's Milan, yeah.
Yes, Milan, who is going to be our guest today. We're going to have a conversation. Milan is from the Netherlands, and he sent us an email requesting a meeting with Sabil. And I'm very happy that we got a chance to meet him, a young person, full of life, and is also addressing an interesting topic. And it's nice to get people who are outsiders who reflect on Palestine, solidarity, and the work that is being done, especially for Sabil, Kumi. We're part of civil society and we're Palestinian and we're interested in defending human rights and finding the best way that we are. But Milan, why don't you introduce yourself? That's the tradition with Sabil.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so my name is Milan, indeed. I'm a Dutch student. I'm currently studying the Master Conflicts, Territories and Identities, which is part of the Human Geography department. And my main focus is on the situation regarding Palestine. So I'm doing a master thesis on the Palestinian situation and mainly on international solidarity and support for the situation. So I got the opportunity to actually visit Palestine and talk to some people over there, to some organizations and people from civil society. So yeah, that was amazing. And now I'm back in the Netherlands and finalizing my research. But I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Omar.
Thank you. And Milan, Palestine, I mean, unfortunately, the world that we're living in, even Europe today, it's filled with conflicts. Why did you think of Palestine? Like, are you in a way connected to Palestine?
Actually not. I guess the first time I got connected with the situation, with the problem was from my understanding in the middle school, it was a real complex problem, and in school books you get like these images and pictures of the state of Palestine that's getting smaller and Israel getting more territory over the years. So yeah, that was the first time I really got known of the situation, and I had like a lot of questions. So over the years I delved in deeper with the situation, and for some school projects I chose this topic because I wanted to know more about it. So then I got more invested in it, and eventually last year or 2 years ago actually, I wrote my bachelor thesis on Dutch solidarity with Palestinians. So that got me even more interested, because then I could really, at that point I really could talk to people that really are supportive of Palestinians and their passion for the situation. So yeah, they kind of dragged me into this whole thing. So yeah.
So I mean, it's the Palestinian Israeli conflict, if we're going to even call it this, has been, I mean, or the struggle of Palestinians has been over 75 years, maybe over 100 years since the Balfour Declaration. Do you think in Holland the younger generation are, it's one of the causes that people are interested in, or it's becoming more difficult to get the attention of younger people like yourself?
Well, that's also a part that I forgot to mention. It also got my attention because on social media, I'm a lot of on Instagram, and when you get like, I watched my news actually on Instagram. So when you read the comments on these Instagram posts or news posts, a lot of comments say "Free Palestine, Free Palestine." So yeah, I guess younger people, are much more open to support for Palestine, and also because the sentiment of the Holocaust is I guess fading away because the younger generation is less has less empathy for that. Yeah, it's not the right word to call it, but it's less connected to the history of the Holocaust, of course. So I guess it's easier for them to criticize Israel in that regard. So yeah.
So it's becoming like more open for people to, or more free for people to speak or about human rights violations. But some people, I mean, Holland is one of the countries that is also welcoming lots of refugees or is hosting many refugees. Is this playing, and many of the refugees are coming from Middle Eastern countries. Is this playing a role with education around Palestine, or it's mainly the Western solidarity traditional movements?
I guess I think it plays a big role. We also have a lot of Palestinian refugees in the Netherlands that are really active in advocating for Palestinian human rights and such. So yeah, I guess it plays a big role, and we have a lot of Moroccans and other Arab people that for sure support Palestinians in that regard, and are really active on social media as well to advocate for the Palestinian cause. So yeah, it plays a big role, I think.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, everything is changing around the world. The world is changing. I mean, the social media is also bringing more people. Everybody's becoming a journalist, so it's easier to share news. People with different generations have different contexts, so that's also playing a big role. So in Palestine, at least when somebody looks from a bird's eye perspective on what's happening in Palestine and Israel, the theory, I mean, it is Palestinians have been trying or continue to try different methods, but each generation or period of time, it has had its, like, certain tools were mostly used. So in the beginning, certain times it was like it's pushing Arab countries. That was like the biggest solidarity. Push Arab had to help Palestinians defend their properties. Then Palestinians said, we're not going to use the Arab world. We're going to use our own national movements. Then people said, we will move into maybe doing like resistance from inside the territories. And that was the Intifada. Then after Oslo, or leading to Oslo, people believe that, many Palestinians believe, it's why don't we defend human rights and use and work with civil society to expose human rights violations, because human rights are important to many people, especially in the free world. And if we educate people, people will advocate with us. So that has been the theory of change. If we educate enough people to what's happening in Palestine and Israel, we can lobby many people to work towards justice and peace. How much is, and most people would advocate either using like tools like BDS, or influencing their political parties. What is the Western or the advocacy groups in Holland are focusing more on, like BDS or influencing their own politicians?
Yeah, I guess it's really scattered actually. You have organizations that support BDS, but you also have organizations that don't believe in that. yeah, their way of or that solution. So yeah, I guess a lot of organizations try to as you say, educate people and try to really have this bottom up approach. Try to get the support from the people, the public support, which I think is actually working, especially in also in the Netherlands on the public level. The support is growing, I think. So that it's a bit of a bottom up approach that they're trying to do, but what I encountered is there's this gap between like the public level and the government level, of course, because the governments are not putting any sanction or doing anything regarding the Palestinian cause. So I think they're trying to fill this gap and bridge this gap, but I think that's still a big challenge of the Dutch solidarity and global solidarity in general.
So you see that the public, I mean, it's the politicians are the ones who are making the compromise because they rely on votes of the people, and how and we've actually, maybe that's a very good perspective because we've had multiple of Dutch decision makers, politicians, members of political parties actually come and like we've had maybe like 10 or 15 politicians visit Sabil in 2022. We don't pay a lot of attention to them because they are not like mainly our focus, but it seems that people are seeking education or a better understanding because they feel the constituency. So whatever the young people or the people on the masses are doing, you're doing the right thing. You're getting the attention of your decision makers, and that's really good. What are the tools that are being used so that the groups are very effective?
What do you mean exactly by tools?
The tools that the people are using to bring the attention of their decision makers that they care about Palestine or the situation in Palestine and Israel. Is it just like social media? Is it just
I guess social media plays a big part, because with social media you get around this mainstream media that is quite pro-Israel. Actually, you have a lot of Israeli narratives and that are really dominant in mainstream media. So I guess social media plays a big part to get around this problem. You have also campaigns and demonstrations and such. But I've went to some demonstrations and I'm not sure if they're that effective actually. What I'm more enthusiastic about it are the campaigns. For example, I think just a few weeks ago, you had like a campaign on blocking imports, or trade with settlements in general, and especially then the Israeli settlements. So I guess these campaigns, can be really valuable. That's a tool that the solidarity movement uses to convince or to change foreign policy, for example, in Europe.
There's a good question in the chat. For people who don't know Holland, what's usually like the composition of the political parties in Holland, and how do they stand on Palestine usually, or Israel?
That's difficult. I guess you have some parties that but only a few small parties are openly critiquing and openly speaking about this topic. I guess a lot of people or a lot of big parties are trying to ignore it, or on purposely ignore it, because they don't want to make it a part of their political agenda, because the whole situation is, of course, the Palestinian situation is a just situation. So if they would make it on the political agenda, they would lose their voters, if you get what I mean. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't know a lot about it actually, about the political stances.
So when you were in Palestine, I mean in Jerusalem, you were meeting, were you only specifically focusing on Palestinian organizations that speak on Palestine, or also Israeli organizations?
Well, I interviewed 12 Palestinian organizations, but I also got to speak to two Israeli, Israeli civilians. And yeah, I guess the most interesting part of it was the notion that um, yeah, it's the pro-Palestinian movement as like this way of criticizing Israel, and because of the Holocaust sentiment, this is really hard to do that because you always get like the anti-Semit argument, counter argument. So what I get to know from these Israeli civilians was that yeah, for them the Holocaust does play a big role still. So it's hard for them to hear critique about Israel. And they explained that this to me, and what they were trying to emphasize on was that the whole solidarity movement should be, if they want to change stances among pro-Israelis and among Israelis, they should have more of a delicate approach in their criticizing and in their critiques, because otherwise Israelis and pro-Israeli people will just, cut off and block, and they won't even listen to the whole argument, because in their minds it's just all about anti-Semitism. So that's really difficult for the movement and for people trying to criticize Israel. That's a big challenge and big problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a way, it's how do you defend Palestinian rights? That's a good, like a major issue. Many people are interested in defending human rights, but also doing it without hurting the feelings of Israelis. You see, it's or to do it effectively, you have to understand the Israeli logic or the logic of the pro-Israeli groups. So I mean, it's that's where most of the Western advocacy works. And what are the opinions of you've met like 12 Palestinian organizations doing advocacy? That's a big number. What like how do you summarize the feedback that you received from them?
I guess first of all, on a positive note, they all have the feeling that on a public level the movement is growing. So on a public level, stances among Israel Palestine are changing, and so that's a really good thing, I guess, or I know for sure. Other things. It's a number of things. Do you want me to? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I mean, you felt like most of the Palestinian organizations working in advocacy were very hopeful, and
yeah, for sure. But in our conversation, you were kind of criticizing this notion of hope. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember. So, so Sabil's perspective was different from other organizations, like, or...
Yeah, a bit. And mainly, with the conversation I had with you, Omar, the main thing I got out of it was to also put it into a bigger picture, because I was mainly focusing on like practical, small things to improve the movement, to increase their visibility or things like that. But yeah, what I really got out of our conversation was to actually put it in a bigger context, and yeah, to actually see that's also part of yeah, things like we mentioned. It's not only the Palestinian case, but it's like human rights in general all over the world are not being adhered to. So yeah, it's part of a bigger problem and part of bigger things than only yeah, that was really valuable out of our conversation, I guess.
Um, yeah, I mean, in a way, yes, many people, we feel things are changing. I was mentioning to Milan that when I started working at Sabil, we had the first Dutch volunteer, many of you know, Meta Floor.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what to do with Holland because everybody, like our experience has been very negative with Holland. But we can see things are changing completely. And that's really beautiful and that's really wonderful in a way. But also, if you look at the Palestinian civil society, we have like 7 organizations, human rights organizations that have been condemned or labeled as terrorist organizations by the Israeli government, without also providing proof for this. And many of these organizations, I know that they either have or had in the past Dutch support, official support from certain organizations. Have you been able to meet some of these organizations?
That have support of the
No, the
Netherlands, you mean?
organizations, yeah, some of these 6 organizations that have been labeled as terrorist organizations, like
Yeah.
Al-Haq, Children International.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked to the one person of the UAWC. I think,
Yes.
yeah, that was part of the 6. And I also talked to Bengon. That was like the
Yes.
yeah. So yeah, I've talked to them, but I didn't really get into how they felt about yeah, not getting the support after getting labeled as terrorists and such. So I don't know.
Did you get during your research? Somebody is asking, have you did you find anything that surprised you or shocked you?
Yeah, one thing maybe there's like a big notion that yeah, I didn't really think about it or didn't know about it too much was the Israeli influence on Western governments. Yeah, the notion that I got from all these Palestinian organizations is that from their perception, yeah, this influence and this is really large. You have like this propaganda machine, as they would call it, and yeah, that's also a difficult point that I didn't really encountered before, because it's also quite vague, you know. It's like how you can't really measure the influence another country has on policy in another country. So there was and it's also difficult because when talking about influence of Israel and also Jews, then you also come close to anti-Semitism again. So that's also part of it, I guess, which is quite challenging when you are discussing the influence of Israel. So yeah, there was one point that really struck me, and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's 2 ways how to look at it. One way is that you can either look at how effective the Israeli media campaigns are, or how well they benefit from using history and narratives, but also somebody can also critique how much our advocacy tools need to be also developed as Palestinians or civil society. Also, given that governments have much more resources than civil society or groups of people, so it's a very thin line that somebody has to be very carefully as we look at it. Some people from the US, some of our friends are asking, how much does US foreign policy have power over Holland? Is it?
Yeah, it's hard for me to to argue that, but what from I know is that, yeah, I guess everybody knows that Europe's stances and countries in Europe always follow trends in the US. But yeah, I don't know too much about that, so yeah, I wouldn't actually know.
There's a question in the chat about how does the school in university, when they address the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, do they present the conflict as one group occupying and dispossessing one group of people from the land, or just a conflict between two groups of people with the same power and same responsibilities?
Yeah, well, I've had some courses within my master's, but yeah, I never had like a full course or full lecture on Israel-Palestine case. Yeah, mainly my courses was about like the causes of conflict in general and the consequences of it and how to get to peace and what peace means and things like that. So we didn't really get into like Israel-Palestine case in general. But yeah, they try to teach us to don't follow the dominant narratives in media, for example. And I guess media really portrays the conflict as it is a conflict with equal sides. And that's what I got from the Palestinian organizations as well. This is what the movement is trying to do as well. They try to counter these dominant narratives and try to focus on what is the truth in quotation. I don't know.
In your paper that you have wrote, or in some of the sections that I saw, you spoke about myths and disinformation and dominant narratives. Is it? Some people think that there is they try to simplify it into one narrative. Some try to say there's actually two narratives, but maybe there's plenty of narratives. Did you hear how many narratives when you were speaking with the Palestinian organizations did you encounter?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I guess the way I see it, it's like almost a battle of the two narratives, because you have, of course, this dominant Israeli narrative, and then you also have like this Palestinian narrative that's trying to get the dominance and trying to prevail over the other one. So what I see, what the solidarity movement is also trying to do, I guess, is like, let this narrative prevail over the other one. So it's from my viewpoint, it's like a battle of these two narratives.
And I mean, we also say that it's important for the civil society to always to take the third narrative, at least. There's more. But if we have to choose between the Palestinian and the Israeli narrative, we need to use the narrative that defends human rights and international law. That's the third narrative, regardless of who is discriminating or abusing people. That's where we need to stand. People should move beyond some nationalistic perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In Holland, how much it's when it comes to business deals and security deals? I think Israel is a much bigger partner than Palestine when it comes to business deals. Logically, I say. How much did you encounter people referring to the challenges of BDS to the private sector in Holland?
And how do you mean? How is BDS?
So BDS targets multiple companies around the world who benefit or work with benefit from the occupation, either by selling products or so on. Was Holland mentioned in the advocacy work that you have met with organizations about how they are implicit with the occupation?
Yeah, not really actually. No, that didn't come to the conversation.
Between the Western groups that or solidarity groups mainly in the West that support or defend Palestinian rights and the Palestinian civil society, did you feel that there is a clear communication channels between both groups, or people are not listening to each other?
I guess what I found is that yeah, that of course there could be more cooperation, but what civil society's perception on this matter is, I guess, like bigger NGOs and like international NGOs are more intent to put on their own agendas in front of like Palestinian needs. And I guess what I've heard is that civil society has more trust in like grassroots movements. So I guess on the public level, there's more people try to really really act on the needs and listen to the needs of Palestinians. And I guess the communication there is better than with international NGOs and like NGOs that really try to push their own agenda and ambitions. So that was one thing I found in my interviews.
You have an interesting section in your paper where you mention, and your paper is not public yet, but that I saw that you classified, or that there's a more understanding that most of the solidarity work with Palestine is more reactive. If there's a war in Gaza, everybody is demonstrating, or there's a village is going to be destroyed in the West Bank, rather than to be proactive. Can you please explain this point to me and to the listeners?
What I found also from my experience with like the movement is that, for example, what you already mentioned, when Gaza gets bombed, you have like all these big demonstrations and all this visibility internationally. But when the conflict like quiets down a little bit, all these the movement also seems to be less visible. So that's a problem as well, because I think it's really important to be proactive as a movement, because what Israel's doing with these attacks of demolitions and such, civil society and the movement gets in like a defensive position, that they also have to react on these Israeli attacks. And it's really important to also be proactive to keep the visibility, and also to keep growing as a movement, and also to keep people engaged, because when you're always like reacting on another war in Gaza and another this and that, then I have the feeling it becomes tiring a bit. And when you have more a proactive approach, then it's more, people are more engaged to the whole problem and to the whole situation, I guess. So this is more of a strategy change that I think could be valuable and could be worth looking into.
Given that there is a big challenge, you speak about in a realistic way, which is that's actually the Dutch way of thinking, in a practical way, that we don't live in a perfect world, or in a world that is governed by ethics. It's governed by needs and logic. Can you explain it? Because many of us who work with civil society or are with activism, we live sometimes in our own world. Could you mention about like how the world works, or remind us how the world works, sadly?
Could you elaborate a bit on that?
You say that governments, they don't care about logically, which is, I agree with you, sadly. Most governments don't care about, or even voters don't care about human rights and so on, even though they use this language. They care more about dealing with unemployment, dealing with getting into better deals with governments, or business deals. Maybe dealing with security is a higher priority, rather, even if it comes on the cost of human rights. This is how you feel in Holland, and in Europe is also the case?
Yeah, I guess so. This is how people work. I guess people have interests, and in general, people put their own interests. Yeah, at first, that's more important than other cases that become second. So yeah, that's basically how it works. Sadly, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's in one of the comments actually from Holland comes that that in the Netherlands, you just decided to buy for $4 billion an Israeli anti-missile shield, and that even was not even discussed in the parliament.
I didn't hear about it. No.
No, it seems to be. It's very sad, because it's billions of dollars are being invested in.
Yeah, that proves that there still is a big gap between public support and support on the governmental level. And yeah, I have that feeling that governments are trying to on purposely not talk about it, to avoid I guess they know it's not a just thing that they're doing, so they just try to avoid it on purpose.
So being, for a month in Jerusalem and Palestine, and speaking with people, and keeping in mind the work that needs to be done to support, to improve the advocacy work, to defend human rights, what are your advice to Palestinian civil society and to the activist groups abroad?
One or two recommendations that I would emphasize on based on the interviews I got. Was also cooperating with different social movements, because the thing that we just talked about, people put interest on first, but I guess people in social movements are already the people that are advocating for human rights. So cooperating with different social movements, they also already have people that are fighting for the same things. So focusing on mutual advocacy points, so fighting for human rights. I guess those movements and people, mostly left-wing people, I guess, they can support each other, and there's a mutual benefit there. So I guess focusing on that to actually grow the movement, and to also put it in a bigger picture. So not only focusing on Palestinian rights, but like human rights in general could be helpful, I hope. Yeah.
I want to thank you very much, Milan. Thank you, I mean, for being interested in Palestine, and for spending time in Jerusalem and listening to people, but also willing to share what you have learned with us, but also with your school. I hope. When do you think you're going to finish your research paper and your findings?
Yeah, I got a deadline coming up in August, so I hope to, and then it's got to be corrected by my supervisor. So I hope to be all finished in hopefully September or end of August maybe. So yeah, got a little bit of work done yet, but it's gonna be fine.
And if you decide when you finish decide to share it, we're happy to share it with people, at least on this call or other friends that we have. Thank you very much, Milan, for being with us. Thank you for
Thanks
your
for
time.
having me. Thank you.
It's our pleasure. And I just want to remind you that next week we do not have a Kumi session. We're having a break. That's a Kumi break. But we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, Milan, and thank you all for being with us. And may God bless you, Milan, with all of the work that you're doing. And hope to see you again in Jerusalem.
Yeah, will be great. Thank you.
Allah. Take care. Take care.